What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and whatever time it is. Welcome back to another video with your man, Measureholic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 2 of my Parthian campaign for the Divided Impera overhaul mod for Total War Rome 2. Ladies and gentlemen, before we do get into it though, I do just want to give you all a sincere and humble thanks. The support on the first video for this campaign received a massive amount of support, and just pretty much all of the support this channel has received has been incredibly generous. We've just smashed 500 subs, so thank you all for that. Highly appreciate it. However, I'll tell you who doesn't appreciate it. It is, of course, the Bactrians. We're starting off this video in a massive crisis. Bactria is declaring war on us, and I say it's a crisis because they have fantastic units, a lot of armies, a lot of money to waste on getting even more armies, and we are their only enemies. So that's how we're starting off today's video, ladies and gentlemen. They already have 2 full stack armies coming straight at us, and while I would debate going up against them, they actually have some excellent nomadic cavalry, which will nullify our cavalry advantage, and so I'm just not even going to bother trying to fight them. The city of Kath hasn't even had time to recruit a garrison, and our small settlement of Nisa is pathetic and hard to defend, so I'm just immediately going to give up and go west. It's time for Parthia to find new lands that are more susceptible to the influence of the Shah, and as such we will now begin our long exile into the west, at least a little bit west. We don't want to go too far into the west, but I mean, we got to do what we got to do. Who knows, we could make it as far as Greece, depending on how badly the campaign continues to go. We started off pretty well in episode 1, but episode 2, Bactria has kind of just changed the game entirely, and it's not even worth us trying to fight them. We just don't have the money for it, and since we're playing on the hard campaign difficulty, all of the enemies around, all of the factions around us will start following them and declaring wars. However, what we will do though is the Shah will lead an attack on the city of Sarakita. Oh wow, am I pronouncing that right? Probably not, but anyway. That means that we have to declare war on Parthia, and even though this is a neutral faction, we do need to take this settlement, get all the money we can, and then continue the migration west. So let's do it. Here we are on the battlefield, ladies and gentlemen. Settlement of Sarakita, Sada, whatever you want to call it. Oh man, it's a late time for me to be recording this, guys, so go easy on me with the pronunciations. But anyway, of course, the battle will begin with our horse archers drawing the enemy out of the town. We have an entire cavalry army now. I've got rid of all of our infantry. Infantry are no good on a migration like this, and as such, we will basically be relying entirely on our horse archers and then our limited cataphract capabilities. The enemy garrison is pretty small and very untrained, so as soon as they start receiving volleys of arrows from us, they get mad and instantly charge out of the town and begin trying to chase down our units. We pull the old Parthian trick of firing while retreating. The enemy army continues to pursue us, and basically they lose massive amounts of men for pretty much no loss on our part. Even though they do have archers, they're just a little bit too far behind to catch up. However, unfortunately, these horse archer units we use don't have much ammunition at all. So as such, we had to begin charging in with our cataphracts pretty early on, although we are basically timing our charges so that the enemy doesn't have any time at all to brace for the impact, and as such our cataphracts will do devastating charges very, very quickly. Since we did run out of ammunition super quick though, I'm basically charging the enemy all around the battlefield. We've drawn them insanely far away from the town, and as such their whole army is completely out of formation. So basically what you're seeing is about half a dozen little mini battles occurring where I have 2 different horse units basically surrounding and charging into enemy infantry units. And even though quite a few of them are spearmen, they're levy spearmen. They're very poorly trained and equipped, and as such even our horse archers that don't have all that great of a charge will still be quite useful. And within a very small amount of time we annihilate about half of the garrison. The other half that's remaining is the a little bit better disciplined heavy spearmen units that they have. However, they're down to just 3 units now. We just annihilated one of their civilian units, and even if these guys were professional hoplites or pikemen, the amount of cavalry we have on the battlefield, 3 of our units are cataphract units specifically, there's just no way they're getting out of this. So we're going to continue to dissect the enemy garrison, and eventually we'll end up committing entirely across the battlefield to recharging them all in very quick succession. As soon as I get a waiver on one enemy unit, I'm recharging into another to basically try to get a chain route from the enemy. We get one of the last 3 units down, the second unit is about to go, it's wavering extremely hard. We then begin to rotate our cavalry over, and then boom, just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we do finally get a chain route, and we end up taking settlement. And we're going to hopefully get enough supplies and money to continue our migration west. But yeah, Parthia failed their first test, and as such, the Shah will continue his journey into exile. Here is the statistics if you do want to see them. As you can see, all of our units across the board did fantastic, but I was really surprised that our single dedicated horse archer unit got over 300 kills. That's very insane considering they didn't do too many recharges themselves. But anyway, we take the settlement of Sarakita. We're going to loot it, get a nice chunk of money that will help us continue our migration west. We'll be able to hire mercenaries when needed, or any other units, so that will help us out. And then we will also dismantle the settlement. We're not going to hold this, we're going to loot it, hit it, and quit it, and get the hell out of there. And so we'll continue our migration west. I will try to get some more cavalry units though, so I'm just going to recruit some horse archer units in addition to at least one more cataphract unit. Cataphracts are really going to be absolutely vital to this migration. So after a turn of resting in the city, the Shah leads our troops west, and now we're going into basically the heart of Persia at this point. We started off on like the northeastern fringes, but now we are heading west into the territory of the Atropatanians. They are another neutral faction. They're busy fighting Armenia at this point. Actually, I'm surprised they weren't fighting the Seleucids yet, but hopefully they will be soon. But for now, we're going to have to try and abuse that situation where they'll be busy. Unfortunately, the settlement we just took, though, is lost instantly within the same turn as some rebels were able to dismantle the tiny amount of troops that we had inside the settlement. It's not a big deal because we still have the settlement of Nisa, and as such, our army won't instantly begin losing troops to attrition. So now we need to hurry the hell up, though. We really need to get the ball rolling. And so the Shah will continue leading his all-cavalry expedition into the west, with the city of Thrapsa being his main goal for now. But as you can see, the Atropatanians have a massive army in one of the settlements here, and as such, we need to try and avoid them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up into the highlands here, hide in the hills, basically on the edge of this very large forested area, and then we'll be going into the ambush stance. And the ambush stance usually makes it so the enemy can't see, or at least has a very low chance of seeing our army. And even though I'm not necessarily looking to ambush the enemy army, since we're not at war with them technically, I'm basically wanting the AI to forget that I have an army in their territory, and if that happens, then hopefully we can get one more turn before we attack them. However, the Bactrians don't care. They're about to attack our capital of Nisa right here, and that's our last settlement in the east. You can see the Bactrians already have a massive amount of territory, and they'll definitely take over Nisa without much of a fight whatsoever. I'm not even actually going to fight the battle manually and try to do as much damage as I could. We're just going to auto resolve it away. And with that, we actually have literally no settlement whatsoever, at least at the time of losing Nisa right here. So what that means is that we will receive a massive amount of attrition instantly. We lose about 30% of our forces. We go from having 120 men in our units to barely 90 men. So that is massive. We need to hit the Atropatanians now, otherwise our entire army will basically die of attrition within just a couple turns, and that's just not acceptable. The entire stake of the campaign lies right now on us taking a settlement within this current turn, and Thrapsa is looking very nice and juicy. The Atropatanians don't have very good garrisons. and as such we should be able to handle it. However, we have taken a lot of attrition, and then the Atropatanians have a massive army nearby, so even if we can take it down, it's going to be very difficult, but either way we have to try. So we're going to declare war on them now. It is a bit of a surprise war, it is a dick move, but who cares at this point? This is all about survival at this point. Bactrians have all of the territory in the east. Sarakita is now independent. Parthia is also hostile towards us, and they will begin to send armies our way, so that's going to be a big issue. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, we have to win this battle. We're taking on Thrapsa right now. We take out the garrison, then the Parthians have a chance at survival. So let's do this, ladies and gentlemen. Here is the Shah Arsaces first, giving a proper hectic speech for his entire all-cavalry army, getting hyped up, ready for battle. Yeah, we're starting off with an interesting formation. We have our cataphracts at the rear in a third line. In the second line we have some horse archers, and then at the front we have even more horse archers, but we have about double the amount of horse archers in the first line compared to the second. So we're basically in a pyramid formation with the Shah in the rear. And the point of this is, well, you'll see here shortly, but basically we're obviously trying to draw the enemy out. And thankfully, though, they actually sallied out from the town, and so there won't be anywhere for them to hide on the battle map, although it is quite hilly. And they are sitting on top of a hill right now, but we're also in a high position. So even though they actually have quite a few archer units, you can see in the front line here, they're still basically just a levy little garrison. We should be able to use our professionalism to draw them out, hopefully pick them apart. So we begin the battle by having our first wave engage with their bows. Then instantly, as soon as they begin to take fire, they will retreat behind the second line, and then the second line will start to rain down fire upon the enemy. However, the first line that just retreated will now split into two halves. One half will go to the right, the other to the left, and basically their goal is to take out the enemy skirmishers. If we can nail their archers early on, then it will really minimize the amount of casualties we'll take, which we really have to do because we know we're going to have a big battle right after this battle if we even manage to survive. And the battle plan is going perfectly so far. Our archers and cataphracts are pulling the main battle line away, but in the meantime the enemy archers get absolutely hammered by our own horse archers. Even though they're not all that great at charging into the enemy, archers of any kind getting charged by horse archers is just not going to go well for them. So in the meantime, our main battle line of cataphracts and archers, horse archers, will continue drawing away as much of the infantry as possible, and hopefully all of it, although some of the enemy units did turn around, but they were just a little bit too slow. As such, the enemy archers are entirely wiped off the field, and in the meantime, we'll actually continue to dissect the enemy army. You're going to be hearing me say that quite a lot, but that's basically the way we have to play it with a all-cavalry army. So what we do is we draw out a single unit on its own, we surround it with as many units of cavalry as possible, and then we just recharge it all at once from multiple sides. And this basically guarantees that at the very least we will get a flanking and a rear charge at the same time. However, back to the main battle line though, our cataphracts are now charging downhill straight into the enemy, which isn't ideal. However, we are on a downhill slope now that we've retreated so far with the enemy, and the entire battle line is entirely out of formation. So I'm still pretty confident that our cataphracts will be able to get the job done, even though they're charging the spearmen from the front. It's a little bit risky, but it actually does seem to pay off in that we managed to surround some of the spearmen units, and we'll get a couple of units routing for almost no cost at all, which is very useful to us. Continuing that, we continue to dissect the enemy units. We get them separated from their main battle line. They do have some very heavy spearmen. I believe it was just 2 units of them though. As long as we can avoid charging into those men, at least when we're not prepared for it, we should be doing pretty well. However, here we are prepared for it, and we will hammer this heavy spear unit with almost all of our cavalry. It's a massive rear charge, and in fact it actually is literally all of our cavalry, and this is their last final heavy spearman unit. We had destroyed and dismantled the enemy garrison. Thankfully, ladies and gentlemen, the Parthian story does not end here. At least not yet. Not only that, but we actually only take 51 casualties for taking out over 2,000 of the enemy, which is fantastic. That is super helpful because we know we're going to have a massive battle with the Atropatanians very shortly after. They have a full 2020 stack army behind us at Ganzak, and we don't even know how many other armies they have in the fog of war nearby. We haven't had time to plan this migration, or this exile is more appropriate really, but we just have to do the best we can. So we're going to loot the settlement of Thrapsa, and that will give us even more money to continue hiring mercenaries if need be, or at least more soldiers and auxiliaries. I nearly occupied the settlement, but I know I'm not going to be staying in this province yet, so even though it would be a decent province, it's too close to the Bactrians. The Bactrians will hunt us down, and we don't need that while we'll also be fighting Parthava. But in the meantime, we just need to continue focusing on survival. Now the Shah is actually starting to level up and become a very, very competent commander. However, you'll note that I didn't get the ammunition perks for the army to give our archers more ammunition, so I made a mistake there. However, I will correct that later in the video, thankfully. But in the meantime, the Atropatanian massive army of 5,000 men is now marching on our measly 1,500 Parthians. This, ladies and gentlemen, whew, this is a showdown for the survival of Parthia. Let's do this. Here we are on the battlefield. We're defending the town of Thrapsa, and we actually are going to be garrisoning the town. We won't be sallying out because we do have some infantry, and I'll show you basically our battle plan. So it begins here with our horse archers at the front of the town. In front of them we have the levy garrison units. They're all pathetic in that they have almost no men for each unit. There's about 20 guys per each unit, if that. But it's still something, and it's something to draw the enemy towards. So we basically have our garrison units here all clumped up together. Horse archers behind them to try and provide some fire support, but not a lot. And then in front of them we have a lot of traps, in addition to one single brave archer unit that is basically manning the stakes out here to try and convince the enemy cavalry to charge into us. Our main goal is to dismantle the enemy's cavalry and their skirmishers, and if we can do that, then we hopefully can surround the enemy spearmen and wipe them out. However, a lot of their spearmen are actually archers, so this is going to be a super tough army for us to take out, which is kind of surprising. Furthermore, on the north side of town here we have a contingent of cataphracts and archers led by the Shah himself, and then on the south side we have a couple more cataphract units and horse archers, although that side of town is a little bit less, is a little more lightly manned, I should say. But here I want to show you guys very quickly just a few little glimpses of what it's like with the reshade I have turned off. So right now it's turned off. We'll turn it back on. Things get a little bit higher with the saturation. The contrast is there. We'll turn it back off again, and you guys can see what vanilla Rome 2 would look like with just the mods I have installed that overhaul the terrain. So hopefully, again, you guys are enjoying it. We've received a lot of cool feedback on the reshade, so again, just a massive thank you guys to for the support for that, and just for the videos in general. It's been really touching, so thank you all. However, what is touching as well is these stakes, and the enemy cavalry is about to find out just how touching they are. They are bombarding our enemies with, our troops with archers, with their arrows. And as such, they will pretty much die before the enemy can actually engage in a melee with them. But regardless, the enemy cav will still charge in and end up dying on the stakes pretty heavily. Combining that with also some arrows of our own coming in to try and kill as many as possible. On the north side of town, though, things are not going well. The Shah is encountering a pretty massive size of spearmen coming towards him, so he's going to have to basically try and draw them out, while the cavalry, the cataphracts of his contingent are actually trying to surround them and get some nice recharges in. On the south side of town, things are looking a little bit better. Our horse archers are basically circling the enemy's main army to try and get as many side shots into the enemy as possible, while we're also sending forward the cataphracts there to charge into the enemy archers. However, our main contingent that's trying to hold the line is just getting hammered. But we don't have time to try and micromanage that. I'm instead focusing on the northern and southern cavalry contingents. The Shah is charging into enemy infantry, and he will get quite a few kills. However, some of the enemy units up here are breaking off and just flanking our units in the town anyway. And as such, our garrison inside the town will basically get annihilated, and it's just a matter of time until that happens. And pretty shortly after this, it did happen. And so as such, we basically formed an entirely new battle line with all of our cavalry outside the town. So basically what's happened is the enemy just ran over our troops inside the garrison, inside the town extremely quickly, and then we lost the town. We basically had no units to garrison it. You can see here the enemy's army is just running all over the town, causing a muck, causing chaos. So basically we've swapped positions with the enemy, and now we're back to being an entirely all cavalry army. However, we did manage to kill most of their archers, and their cavalry units have been almost annihilated. However, their general, which is actually their king, is currently still alive on horseback, so we're going to have to try and hunt him down. So after a few minutes of having our cavalry rest up, we begin to form up on the north side of town. There are some hills out here, so we're going to try and use this section of terrain to draw the enemy out and get some decent downhill charges. The hills are pretty small. You could almost argue it's not even a hill, but it's better than nothing, really. As long as we can get some sort of downhill charge, it will help. And the enemy is not messing around. They're actually sending all of their army out to hunt down our cavalry. However, as I bait the enemy to follow my main battle line of cavalry, I sent forward 2 cataphract archer horse archer units to try and assassinate the enemy king. If we can get him, then it will really do a massive deal of damage to the enemy morale. And if we can do that, then hopefully we'll be able to actually get a lot of them routing fairly easily with some decent rear charges. But unfortunately, as soon as we begin to try and pound him with arrows, the enemy king retreats back into the town, and the entire rest of his army follows suit. So what I'm going to do is basically micromanage my entire battle line to be within about 50 meters of the enemy, and then retreat to try and draw them away. Meanwhile, my archer cataphract units here are still chasing down the enemy's king, and they finally actually get him on his own in the town square. And so we're going to be able to outflank him, rear charge him, and while it will take a fair little while, we'll actually be able to kill him and make the rest of his bodyguard rout. However, while we were doing that, his entire army must have heard of him being caught up, and as such they began to retreat back into the town. So to try and stop them, we're going to have to dedicate some serious charges into them to try and bait them to be more focused on our main battle line, which is very risky because the majority of their army is now spearmen, and spearmen and taking on charges from horse archer units generally will go better for the spearmen if they're in tight formations like this. So basically a massive blob right now, which is kind of scary for me to be rear charging, but we have to delay them until our cataphracts get the kill on their king. Thankfully we do get the kill though. Not only that, but the cataphract units will actually escape from the town, so we'll be able to have them flank out the south side, and they will come and rejoin our main battle line on the north side. So things are starting to look a little bit better. However, the enemy still has a massive amount of infantry inside the town, and again, almost all of them are spearmen at this point, with large shields, and even though they're not all that well trained, some of them are actually highly trained and basically are hoplites at this point. So this is still looking very, very rough. About half of our cavalry has been lost already, and so we're going to have to try and do some very nice flanking charges on the enemy. So you're basically going to be seeing a lot of deep shots like this, where we're seeing all the UI turned on and me trying to micromanage things. The enemy army chased our cavalry out. I was able to bait them to follow our units out. And since they were in this long kind of column formation, I thought I would try and gamble this and do an all-out charge with almost all of our cav all at once, hitting them from the north and south side. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough, and so we will have to pull back, and we'll actually take quite a few casualties in the process since we're in extended melee. However, shortly after this though, the enemy infantry continues to chase our cavalry outside of town. We continue to basically draw them out away from the buildings, And then we get units like this that wander off on their own, and as soon as they're like about 100 meters away from their main battle line, we then surround them and completely recharge them and annihilate them. And so that's basically our game plan now. In the distance, you can see the Shah is leading his cataphracts to try and bait the enemy to continue following him away from the town up the hill. And while that's happening, some of our cataphracts and all of our horse archers are charging in to the enemy units that are completely on their own. And so this is really the only way we're going to win right now. So it's going to take a lot of micromanagement on my part and a lot of discipline on the part of the men. Here's another example of us being able to dissect one of the enemy units away from the main battle line and get in some very nice rear charges. And this is also charging in with purely just our cataphracts, which will be deadly to the enemy. We do get some very nice recharges with this. Being able to charge in on both sides at the same time guarantees at least one of the sides will be a recharge. So that is definitely going to be very helpful for us to try and mimic for each different charge. I then try to have just my horse archers bait the enemy units out from the main battle line on their own. And while that happens, our cataphracts begin to hammer the enemy from each side yet again. Some of our cataphracts did get really tired though, so they will have to take a rest. And then our horse archers will have to come in and try and fulfill their role. But that's okay with me. I'm not really looking to kill all of these units. I need to get them routed and then worry about killing them in the route of the battle. The battle continues with this method still going on. They're down to 4 actually fairly decent spearmen units now. However, we haven't lost too many of our cavalry since we've begun to do this tactic on them. And as such, things are starting to look a little bit better, and the Shah is actually getting involved directly. He's using all of his new abilities that he's earned to keep morale up. And as such, we won't actually have many more of our men rout from the battlefield, even though we've had a massive chunk already rout. Battle continues. We're down now to 3 enemy units. One of them again gets peeled off. They just get too tempted to try and chase down some of our cavalry because we can get them super close without actually being charged by the enemy infantry. We can get them as close as about 10 meters before we need to turn back. So me trying to micromanage that has just made this work perfectly so far. And thankfully, the last 2 Atropatanian units just can't handle the recharging anymore. They're sick of it, and we actually win the battle. Our 1,500 men defeats the 5,000 enemy soldiers that were trying to end Parthia. We did it, ladies and gentlemen. However, it is at a fairly heavy cost. We do lose several hundred men, but then they lose the majority of their army. They lost over 3,400 men out of 5,000, which is actually a lot better than what it sounds, because the majority of their army was basically levy-style troops, which means that a lot of their units actually had 300 men per unit, which is why their army was so vast. But thankfully, we killed their king, we killed their cavalry, killed most of their skirmishers, so after this, we'll actually run down their units and wipe them out. And then we actually had a couple turns of respite. I guess they didn't have an army nearby, and as such, we were able to actually recruit some levy units, and then we will consolidate them. We actually ended up taking a little bit of attrition with them, since we auto-resolved the battle with the remnants of that army. But either way, the main thing is that we have taken Thrapsa, and now we will leave it, and we will march into Armenia. The settlement of Armavir to the north is held by the Atropatanians. It's held by a pretty pathetic garrison, and as such, I won't even show you guys a battle. I did manually fight it, but we won it pretty successfully, pretty easily too. And as such, we now own territory in Armenia, and I think this is where we will now call our new home, at least for now. That's the plan. This is where we'll be ending the video here shortly. I will show you guys me occupying the settlement and basically reforming our army. We'll disband some of our mercenary units we've recruited. We need to get our economy rolling. But since we just occupied the settlement, Armavir will be our new home in northeastern Armenia. So hopefully this works out. I don't want to migrate any further because I do want to head back and take out the Bactrians. We have to get our revenge on them in this campaign. That's now my #1 goal. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.